Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to RBC Presents the Walrus Talks Social Impact. My name is Shelley Ambrose. I'm the Executive Director of the Walrus Foundation and the publisher of the Walrus Magazine. We are thrilled to be back here at this beautiful Koerner Hall, here on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit. This little optimistic project called the Walrus started almost 15 years ago. In fact, our 15th anniversary is next year in 2018. And for almost 15 years, we've been engaged in the Canadian conversation, first of all by publishing the Walrus Magazine. Hands up if you know what that is. The Walrus Magazine, woohoo! Thank you, yay you. You got the first one right. Let's see how many of you get this one right. How many of you subscribe to the Walrus Magazine? Okay, you're my favorite people. See me afterwards, I'll buy you a drink. That's how easy that is. So for 15 years, we've been publishing the Walrus Magazine, and for 7 years, we have been producing this series called The Walrus Talks. Tonight is our 87th Walrus Talks across the country. Yes. And so hands up if you've been to a Walrus Talks before. I've been to 87. And hands up if you're new. Let's welcome the new people. Yes. In all things Walrus, on the page and on the stage and on the screen, you'll find well-told stories on everything from public policy to culture, the environment, technology, and so much more. Everything we do is meant to spark a conversation for you to engage and share and be involved in conversations that matter, and you're here. So thank you for heeding the call. We so appreciate your presence and your time. The Walrus community, which now includes you, share a few common traits. One in particular is the tendency to be curious and open-minded. We have an educational mandate at the Walrus. That does not mean we're pointy-headed. It means that we are fact-based. Our journalism, we never thought we used to have to say this out loud, our journalism is fact-based. Yes, we have real-life human fact-checkers. You can trust what you read in the Walrus and what you hear on a Walrus stage. We're governed by a national board of directors. Some of our directors are here tonight: Sherry Austin, Bruce Bennett, Janelle Lassonde, Lucille Joseph. We also have a National Advisory Council, which includes some people here tonight: Michael Decter, Helga Stephenson, and Marina Glogovac, who's one of our speakers. We also have an Education Review Committee to keep us on the straight and narrow. One of our members, Leah Karagada, is here with us tonight. We also train the future leaders in the media. We have a unique editorial fellowship program designed to ensure that the future of journalism, not just at the Walrus, but everywhere, is bright. Some of our Walrus staffers and fellows are here today. Can you put up your hands, Walry? Where are you? Put it way up, way up. You can meet those people at the reception. And if you have a story idea to pitch, that's where you go. I'm just the publisher. Don't pitch to me. Pitch to them. Our training programs and our journalism are supported by circulation, advertising, sponsorship, charitable donations, and partnerships. And there's absolutely no way we can do the work we do without partners like RBC and RBC Foundation. RBC is actually one of the Walrus's longest standing partners, and there's no way we'd be looking at a 15th anniversary without the role they have played in our growth. They support our ability to publish emerging artists and writers, and of course have made it possible for us to host the Walrus Talks here tonight. RBC is also a lead visionary donor at the Walrus in our Optimistic Canadians program. What does Optimistic Canadians mean? It doesn't mean we think everything is perfect, no. It means that they have made a pledge for 5 years, and in the way that journalism is working and in the way everything is working or not working, to make a pledge for 5 years is pretty optimistic. So we love RBC for that. And to tell us a little bit more about RBC, please welcome the Senior Director, Youth Strategy and Innovation, RBC Corporate Citizenship, Mark Beckles.
Thank you, Shelley, and congratulations to you and the Walrus Foundation for yet again convening these important conversations, the Walrus Talks. And RBC, of course, is very proud to be the presenting sponsor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you are looking forward to a great evening. I think it's tremendous that this is the 15th anniversary and that RBC has been along for the journey, for the entire journey, I think is remarkable, and I'm proud to be associated with both the Walrus Foundation, the Walrus Talks, and of course, RBC. When you think about or hear the words social impact, do you think about changing social systems or disrupting the status quo? Is it just a fancy way of saying, find new ideas and make the world better? Or does social impact define our reason for being, what we want to achieve, and the values for which we stand? As Canada navigates this unprecedented time of opportunity, of uncertainty, of innovation, and of challenge, RBC is focused on creating greater awareness of the issues that are facing Canadian youth. Young Canadians are, in fact, facing challenges as they transition between education and work due to a lack of preparedness and a lack of access to support and resources. Canada's future prosperity depends on our ability to harness the energy, the skills, the innovation, and the optimism of young people so that they can make their contribution to the future success of our country. They have the ambition, they have the potential, and if provided with the opportunity, they can innovate and they can transform our social and economic systems to shape a better future and to shape a better Canada. Focusing on youth is RBC's North Star, and it will guide us in everything that we do. And it's through thoughtful conversations about our world and how to make it better that we believe that we will drive social impact, and that includes the conversations that we are going to hear, that we're going to participate in this evening. I can't wait to hear these conversations. I cannot wait to hear the fantastic lineup of speakers, and I've met them all, and they are going to be impressive, trust me. And so as we talk about this important conversation around social impact, open your minds, open your hearts, open your ears, and as my mother would say, listen. Thanks so much and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks again to everyone at RBC and RBC Foundation. I also want to thank our national partners at SSHRC, at Inspire, at Shaw, and at AMIA Aeroplan, and to our founding donor, the Chalkers Foundation, some members here tonight, Bruce Bennett, Jerry Lazar, and Preeti Varma. So as Mark said, our topic tonight is social impact. What does that mean? Well, the actual definition of social impact is what is the result of your action? What is the significant positive change that addresses a significant social challenge that is a direct result of your deliberate action? And we're going to hear 7 perspectives on that tonight. Here's how the Walrus Talks works. You each have a program in your hand. The front of the program is in speaker order. The back of the program has the short bios of the speakers. We keep the lights on so you can follow along. I am not going to pop up here like a jack-in-the-box and read the bios to you. I know you can handle it. Each speaker is going to come up and introduce themselves, and you will see and hear 7 speakers in a row. And after that, we will have a lot to talk about at the post-talks reception to which you are all invited. So just before I let them get underway, I would like to thank them in advance. So thank you to pastor and activist Brent Hawks. Thank you, President and CEO of Dignitas International, Heather Johnston. The President and CEO of Canada Helps, Marina Glogovic. The Director of Strategic Initiatives for Mayor John Tory at the City of Toronto, Siri Algrell. An Associate at Burgundy Asset Management and a future philanthropist, Roz McLean, the founder and executive director of Stop Gap Foundation, Luca Anderson, and refugee advocate with the Mccurdy Foundation, T. Mccurdy. Thank you all for coming. Let us begin.
I'm Brent Hawkes, and I'm going to speak to you this evening about activism from the perspective, about social change from the perspective of being an activist in the LGBT community. And there are 9 quick points I want to make. In terms of activism, I believe that there's always been 2 elements that are absolutely crucial in order for activism to really make social change work. And those have been protest and negotiation. If we don't have protest, often institutions don't pay any attention to us, or if they do, they're just pretending to pay attention to us. The protest catches the attention, while the negotiation helps to move things forward. And so we need both. And the importance of having mutual respect among the protesters for the folks on the inside negotiating, and the negotiators having respect for the protesters on the outside. Secondly, I wish I could say that ideas really change things. And while ideas are crucial, I believe it's relationships that really change things. And the best example I have of that is a man named George Hislop, who years ago, when we were trying to meet with the police to get them to make some changes to improve their relationship with the gay and lesbian community, they would hardly meet with us, hardly pay attention to us, wouldn't take any notes, wouldn't make any changes. Until George started memorizing the wives' names, and in those days the senior police were all male. He'd memorize their wives' names, their kids' names, their dogs' names. And when we would meet, for the first 5 minutes, he would just smooth them about who their wife was and what she was doing lately and which kids graduated from university. And that began to break the ice, and it really opened up them to listening to us. And so down through the years, we worked hard on building those relationships, on celebrating the successes, even though they were small in the early days, and making sure that we dwelled on the positives while we dealt with a large number of negatives. Third point is probably the one you're going to disagree with me most on. In order to affect social change, it's crucial to expose the extremes, to talk about the cases of discrimination, to tell the horror stories, and also to expose the extremists. I've often said that whenever there was a debate about a law or a change that needed to happen, one of the smartest things we could ever do is find the wackiest person on the other side and go on a tour with them across Canada. Because as we exposed those extremes, it moved the middle ground toward us. Fourthly, all social change, in my opinion, is incremental. Very seldom do you make a big move forward, but you build on those little successes. And when you hang in for everything, you usually get nothing. And that means tough choices, painful compromise. However, it builds the movement as you make a little bit of gain and more people get involved and more people feel encouraged to be out and to be involved. And you have to be in it for the long haul. Down through the years, first we had to work for the decriminalization of same-sex sexual activity. Then we had to get job protection so people wouldn't be fired. Then we had to fight for relationship recognition so we could visit our partners in the hospital or adopt our kids. And finally, it was equal marriage, step by step by step, affecting change over the long haul. Fifth, legal changes are crucially important, but sometimes they're mainly symbolic. And as important as that is, it's the follow-up that's crucial. Equality in law does not necessarily mean equality in practice. It's ongoing education. They said that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. I think that's true. I also think the price of freedom is eternal education, bringing segments of society along. Number 6, the important role of various institutions in impacting social change. Over the years, in the early days, it was the politicians, working on a few politicians to pass legislation and to speak out. And I think it's unfortunate that nowadays we say that the politician's role, I think, is diminishing. And more, it's the courts, where we have to go to the courts to fight for change. And I'm really pleased that the Court Challenges program has been brought back in by the current government. But also the crucial role of the media in getting the information out. A good article in a respected newspaper can change hearts. And interestingly enough, one of the institutions that are really impacting change nowadays are corporations. And I can almost say that in some respects, corporations are taking the place of activists. And just want to use a couple of examples. In India, when they recriminalized homosexuality, It was IBM that sent their executives to India to challenge the government to say, we're not going to make further investments as long as you discriminate against our employees who are in India or our international employees who are coming to India. And I think all of us saw what happened recently in North Carolina when they were going to pass that crazy bathroom legislation. And many corporations said that they were going to pull their conventions from North Carolina. And that really caught the attention of politicians. So when you're trying to affect social change, don't forget those various institutions and the roles that they play. In 2001, I performed the first marriage of a gay and lesbian couple anywhere in the history of the world. And because of the media attention of that event, because of the death threats that I got, because I had to wear a bulletproof vest, because I had 12 bodyguards protecting me, 11 of the toughest looking lesbians you've ever seen in your life, and one gay man coordinating it all. That points out that sometimes, seriously though, those who break ground have to pay a price. But a reporter told me that because of all of the publicity of that event, that it was the biggest shift in public opinion on any social issue in the history of Canada. Because there was so much media coverage that everyone was talking about this event. Which leads me to my next point. It's important that there is public discussion and making sure there's ongoing public discussion about whatever the social issue is that you're addressing. Prejudices die when they are exposed. They have life when they're unexpressed and when they're unchallenged. We can have reasonable arguments, reasonable discussions with each other, but ultimately, I believe truth will win the day. The challenge in this era of social media is that it's, yes, so much easier to get the message out, but it also allows the extremists to find other extremists and to form bonds. For those of you who are able to fund organizations, I would really encourage you, and this is my final point, many of the organizations who are working very hard to affect social change are so poorly funded. If they had funds to train the young activists to do media work, if they had funds to hire communications firms to help them with communication strategies, so much more can be done. Ultimately, I'm an optimist. And I believe that if our cause is right, it will prevail. And all we have to do is look back at the history of the last, I've been the pastor of our church for 40 years. Look back over the last 40 years and see the progress that's been made on behalf of the LGBT community. It has been phenomenal. So activism does work to impact social change. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Heather Johnston. Tonight, I'd like to disrupt the way we think about international development and the role that non-governmental organizations can play in creating social impact. I've had a rich and rewarding 20-year career working in international aid. I've had the privilege to live and work throughout Africa. I spent over a decade in Mali in West Africa, and I've also spent time in 5 or 6 other African countries. What troubles me most, despite having spent so much time working in this sector, is the paradigm of foreign aid from high-income countries like Canada and the role that NGOs play in how that aid gets distributed. I recently had an experience that really challenged this paradigm, and tonight I'm hoping I can challenge you to think a little differently about how we might do things. I want to start by saying there are many international NGOs that do transformative work around the world, and I like to think I work for one of them. My aim is certainly not to discredit this work. However, in Africa and across much of the global south, we see a major power imbalance between high-income countries that give aid and the low-income countries that receive that aid. Foreign aid is very often dispersed by international NGOs, and they directly deliver programs in the areas of health, education, agriculture, and they deliver these programs in partnership with local governments and community organizations. And I put that in quotes because it's been my experience that these programs are usually designed and implemented with actually very little collaboration or consultation with the people that they're meant to benefit. When there is consultation, more often than not, it's just lip service. The reality is that when you control the purse strings, you control the agenda. And that can lead to some very bad decisions and some very bad development. A couple of examples. In Africa, I regularly saw bureaucrats from donor countries make decisions with very little understanding of the historical, political, cultural context in which they operate. Sometimes these bureaucrats are controlling budgets larger than the Minister of Education or the Ministry of Health in those countries. I've seen NGOs set up parallel health systems, clinics, hospitals. They set these clinics up with international aid funding, and then they poach the top bureaucrats away from the public health system. Again and again, I have seen projects that are driven by donor interests and their funding priorities. And these are all examples that are in direct contradiction to the principles of sustainable and community-driven development, development that can lead to social impact. In 2015, I joined Dignitas International here in Toronto. We're a medical and research organization that works to strengthen healthcare systems. And we have programs in Canada and in Africa. After a decade of strengthening the AIDS response in rural and remote communities in Malawi, Dignitas wanted to leverage its experience to help Indigenous communities here at home facing similar challenges. Challenges such as limited access to health infrastructure, to health professionals, and what we might call perhaps the lack of culturally safe care to meet patient needs. We know that Canada's colonial history has led to absolutely disastrous health outcomes for Indigenous people in this country. And yet, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission reaffirms the right of Indigenous people to determine their own health needs and have ownership of the health systems in their communities. So at Dignitas, we started on this journey with a feasibility study to assess if an NGO like Dignitas could play a meaningful role in supporting Indigenous communities in improving health outcomes. As a result of this study, we were invited by the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority to explore community-based models to respond to an urgent diabetes epidemic in rural and remote communities in Northern Ontario. In forming the partnership with the Health Authority, we identified very early on some core tenets of that relationship, and those were learning and equity. We were quite deliberate in collaborating where our skills as an NGO were needed to close a gap and complement the work of our partner. And I'd like to think that this differs quite a bit from how NGOs traditionally might do this kind of geographic expansion, where it would be driven by funding availability. In our partnership with the Sioux Lookout Health Authority, we did a few notable things that I like to think really shifted this balance of power and gave a greater voice to our partner and the people that they serve. The first thing we did is we consulted. We consulted with a diverse group of stakeholders, including patients, who helped to shape a community health worker program focused on strengthening an Indigenous-led model of diabetes care. We also challenged the conventional model of north to south knowledge flow. And we did that by visiting community health worker projects in the global south in places like Pakistan, Brazil, Zambia. We took what we learned from those programs and we brought them back to Northern Ontario. Finally, we worked collaboratively to design the pilot community health worker program. The Health Authority, they took the lead on implementing this program, while our NGO role was focused on training, research, evaluation, where our skills were needed most. Good development that creates social impact requires authentic partnerships that are rooted in common objectives, in equity, and in trust. On paper, it sounds obvious. In practice, it's not easy. It means fostering an open dialogue and confronting differences that may be profound. For an international NGO that was used to driving its own agenda, it felt quite risky to take the back seat and to trust, to create a space that gave agency to a local partner and that valued their knowledge and their know-how. It takes humility and a willingness to open ourselves to learn and approach the work and the world from a different perspective. And I have to say, we certainly did not always get this right. But we have an opportunity to redefine the NGO role, and we learn this from this partnership. There's an opportunity to shift this balance of power back where it belongs, in the hands of the people we support to build better communities and better lives for themselves and their families.
Hello, my name is Marina Glogovets, and with my team at CanadaHelps.org, I spent a lot of time thinking about how technology, philanthropy, and impact compete and combine. As we all know, there has been a real huge technology-propelled upheaval across the board in the last couple of decades, and philanthropy, just like the media, travel, retail, publishing, and music sectors, continues to be affected and transformed by the fast proliferation and widespread adoption of digital, mobile, and social technologies. We definitely live in an era of disruptive innovations and creative destruction. Entire industries have been wiped out, weakened, and in many cases replaced by the whole new ones that simply did not exist before. And it's worth pointing out that most, actually all of this disruption has come from outside of the established systems. On a deeper level, the disruption that we're all witnessing is not just about new products or new ways of doing things. It's about a fundamental rewriting of the rules of engagement, the rules of business. Who can do what, who can compete with whom, and under what circumstances. All sorts of lines and boundaries have blurred. These changes have been driven by many different factors, but a few key ones are massive demographic shifts with a whole generation that has only known the internet taking a center stage, an exponential increase in consumer power, where consumer preferences and expectations for how they want their experiences are driving the change regardless of whether affected parties like it or not. The proliferation and ubiquity of connected devices and increased volumes and availability of data. These driving forces have created some general trends. We've seen the democratization of content generation and, more importantly, authority. Everyone is a publisher today, and I can hear the collective journalistic cringing in the room. Social networks and their culture of compulsive sharing are powerhouses of unprecedented scale and reach. But one of the most fascinating phenomena to come out of all these changes is what we have come to call person-to-person. It signifies a wholesale restructuring of power and influence in the public sphere. Research now confirms that we today trust friends and each other more than we trust any traditional authority or institution. It has spanned social networks, peer-to-peer selling, lending, payments. Blockchain certainly can be viewed as a peer-to-peer enabled technology, and user reviews and recommendations, and relevant to charities, the absolutely meteoric rise of personal philanthropy crowdfunding, which in 2015 was over a $15 billion market in North America alone. The new peer-to-peer technology-driven capabilities serve to enable the long tail of sellers and buyers, givers and receivers, peers. The influence between peers is the new currency of our times. Finally, we live in an increasingly data-driven environment. Massive amounts of real-time data are being uploaded with mobile devices, sensors, and wearable technology. In the words of respected internet commentator Mary Meeker, mining the rising volume of data has the potential to yield patterns that help solve previously unsolvable problems. Now, how has all this impacted charities? There has been a blurring of lines between profit and nonprofit, with a growing popularity of social entrepreneurship, the emergence of new concepts such as social finance and impact investments, now accelerated through technology, the embrace of the triple bottom line by millennials, new legal entities like B Corps and Triple C Corps, and the changing role of corporate philanthropy. This, combined with the data-obsessed world in which dashboards are definitely in the zeitgeist, has created an urgent need for defining and measuring impact of the charitable world, and really and really the whole new level of kind of pressure and expectations for charities. I welcome the desire to capture and communicate impact because the almost exclusive focus on the so-called admin ratio has resulted in a disturbing lack of capacity across the board for Canadian charities. But I also worry about the human experience side of impact getting swept away in the metrics craze, and that anything that we cannot quite measure will be dismissed as non-consequential. Data is not the end. There is and always will be something reductionist about trying to squeeze all of reality into the data, metrics, and pivot tables. Real impact calls for a real change, first and foremost. For me, the real change is the one that changes us in the process. As a matter of fact, they're one and the same. And at the heart of real change is first seeing the illusion that we're separate from each other. It is the stories that change us by breaking that illusion. It is the stories where readers merge with the subjects. The power of stories is our shared human journey. It is stories that, by changing us first, have the potential to affect real change. And so in the data and numbers era, where we can see and measure more than ever before, let's not forget the primacy of narrative as a potent tool for change, the primacy of stories. Stories already told, and stories that still need to be embedded into our shared experience. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Siri Agrell. Yes, Siri like the iPhone, except I know way more and I will not answer any of your questions. I want to start by telling you about one of my favorite things on Twitter right now, which is not hard because everything else on there is pretty much awful. It happens when an entrepreneur or a tech founder or a company unveils a new product and then someone else points out that they've basically invented a substandard version of something that has been around for a very long time. And I call this inventing the tent. Exhibit A is the pause pod. This is a structure that you can set up and climb inside after a hard day of coding or thinking or typing or Instagramming. And yes, as someone rightly pointed out, it is basically an indoor tent. This trend has also seen the invention of things called co-living and house hacking, which were put forward as potential solutions to our affordable housing crisis. And they are essentially new names for living with roommates or renting out your basement. There have also been an innovative new product introduced by a rideshare company recently where instead of being picked up at your house and taken somewhere specific, the vehicle drives along a set course, a set route, and you can get on or you can get off. And yes, when this service is available to everyone, it's called the bus. So what does this have to do with social impact? Well, I'm here to argue to you and somewhat to myself that government is the greatest tool of social impact that there is. Governments are social impact agencies. Cities and provinces and countries are social impact agencies. They provide rights and opportunities, or they don't. They exist to serve the needs not of customers or of shareholders, but of the people. Of all the people, regardless of whether they walk or drive or rent or own or have access to the internet and smartphones or not. That is their mandate. That is their purpose. And so at a time when there's lots of discussion about innovation in the government space, about smart cities and data and technological solutions, it's absolutely essential that we talk about and understand the purpose and the role and the impact that government has and needs to have. Because if we don't, we run the risk of accepting substandard alternatives that don't serve the same purpose and that will not protect the same ideals. It's not enough to say that government needs to understand technology and innovation. Innovators and technologists have to understand the role of government, what it is there to do, and all the people that it's there to serve. We need to understand what we already have in order to make it better. We have to see ourselves as standing on the shoulders of giants and then try and reach higher with that firm foundation beneath our feet. We need to believe in government so we can build on those systems and improve upon them and augment them, and also so we can protect them. There is a real risk to not talking about government as a vital agent of social impact. We can see this by what happened in the media and the institution of journalism, and with some of the emerging consequences of how people now receive the majority of their information. I worked as a journalist for more than a decade, and I watched as the media was slow to adapt to emerging technology and the way that people were consuming and relating to information. The failure to adapt undermined or contributed to undermining the media's role, and as they struggled to keep up, I think they also failed to adequately reinforce their true value proposition, which is as the purveyors of truth. And so other forms of information sharing were developed, celebrated at the time for their ease of use and their accessibility, but which also introduced a whole new range of issues for the public because they are not built on the foundation of verified information. And so now we're dealing with things like this. We are seeing in real time that agencies of social impact can be undermined and their value degraded, and this is a dangerous thing, especially right now. It can happen naturally as people fail to evolve and adapt and as new alternatives emerge, but it can also occur by design, by those who have something to sell or something to gain. A study by 2 Harvard academics found recently that belief in democratic government is in decline. There are 3 factors in this decline they found, one of which is anti-systemic parties and movements whose core message is that current systems are illegitimate or ineffective. There are those who benefit when people stop thinking that government is a force of good in their lives and start to act like it doesn't matter who's in charge or what is done. We're seeing that play out in countries, and so it's vital to reinforce the narrative that democratic governments, I'm talking about democratic governments, are not illegitimate or ineffectual, because that's dangerous and it's simply not true. And so let's talk about the social impact that government delivers. Housing, transportation, healthcare, employment training, social services, shelter support, clean water, public safety, these are the foundational protections on which we all rely. We have to embrace the fact that they are important and they are necessary and they are part of the conversation on social impact and social change. They are also constantly evolving. The impact that government has is profound in that it is a live issue, responsive to the emerging needs of the people, and improved upon, especially when pushed and encouraged and inspired and enabled, and even sometimes when strongly opposed. Look at what government can achieve. LGBTQ leaders and advocates can speak out tirelessly for equal rights, but only governments can make same-sex marriage legal. NGOs can do tireless work on behalf of populations around the world, but only governments can make long-term commitments to international aid. Philanthropy can harness the generosity of individual citizens to address worthy causes, but only governments can provide stable, long-term funding to vital social support networks and our country's most vulnerable populations. Advocates and innovators can generate ingenious solutions to problems like accessibility, but only governments can actually commit to supporting and maintaining whole systems that are accessible, that serve everyone of every background and ability and orientation. And yes, people who have lost their loved ones in ways that I cannot begin to imagine, escaping war and persecution and untold horror, those people can tell their stories and ask for the compassion of the world, but only governments can open their doors to refugees in their time of need. Government is an agent of social change that must be believed in and pushed and encouraged and improved by other agents of social change. Because governments can also do the right thing when no one wants them to, when people don't believe in climate change, when they don't want a safe injection site or a homeless shelter in their neighborhood, when they don't want to pay taxes or engage with issues like hoarding or systemic racism or the other myriad issues with which government has an obligation to contend. No, government is not perfect, trust me, I know that. But that's partly because it doesn't have the luxury of impermanence. It is harder to experiment and evolution comes more slowly when you have the obligation to protect and maintain the diverse interests of an entire population, when you cannot be the source of unintended consequences. And so we need to believe in government. We need to work in government. We need to challenge and expect more of government. We need to understand its dimension and its purpose, its intent and its ideals. Every government and every system must be pushed, challenged, augmented, and innovated upon from the inside and from the outside. They must constantly improve and adapt, and they must tell their stories of impact. And yes, I know this takes too long, and I know it's frustrating and slow. Believe me, I know that. But we can believe that something can occasionally be better and still believe that its existence is vitally and fundamentally important, I know that because it's how we all feel about the walrus. Government is not a tent, it's not a bus, it's not a basement you rent out. It's not something that can be replaced or replicated. It's not something that we should sneer at or dismiss or forget to think about. It is not an area where we can accept pale imitations. It's a complex system of social impact, and when we pretend that fixing it is easy, or we try to innovate without understanding what we already have, or when we tell ourselves it doesn't matter if it lasts or who is in charge, or when we let people design it for one type of person, or if we give up on it altogether, then all you're going to get is a shittier tent.
Good evening. My name's Roz McLean, and I'm going to talk to you about strategic philanthropy and city building for the next generation. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my perspective is informed. And what it boils down to is that I've been very lucky. Lucky to live in Canada, lucky to grow up in Toronto, to have studied financial economics, and I've been lucky to have worked in asset management for the past 3.5 years. When I was young, my dad worked for the City of Toronto in the Office of Economic Development and Culture. On the weekends, he would often take my sister and me to remote neighborhoods for breakfast. And I've always described our trips this way, but in hindsight, many of these breakfast trips were to areas like Leslieville, Regent Park, and Rexdale, so they're not really as remote as I thought they were when I was 12. But after breakfast, my dad would take us for walks around the neighborhood. He would tell us about what the neighborhood used to be like, what it was like now, and the direction it might be moving toward. This instilled in me a perspective not to see neighborhoods for what they are today, but for what they could be and in the context of what they were. He taught me to see potential in the world around me. So for the past 7.5 years, the focus of my academic and professional life has been the study of finance and investment management, both at Western and at Burgundy, where I work now. My focus in this field comes from a fascination with how well-run businesses are able to compound the value of the limited resources available to them. At Burgundy, we conduct rigorous research on individual companies, and we look for companies that are run by capable, honest management that have the potential to grow the value of our investment over the long term. Fundamentally, finance and investment is the study of how the decisions we make today affect the world around us tomorrow. We use capital markets as a tool to facilitate this decision-making process, a tool that motivates and rewards the practice of thoughtful and disciplined research. So what does all this have to do with strategic philanthropy? Well, to put it simply, there is no capital market mechanism to facilitate investment in not-for-profit opportunities. In fact, when it comes to charitable giving, there's very little infrastructure in place at all to help investors decide which organizations would use their money most effectively and efficiently. As a result, capital allocation in the not-for-profit sector can be indiscriminate and potential can be left unrealized. Of course, the careful evaluation of philanthropic opportunities is available to individuals or organizations who have the scale to conduct this kind of rigorous research. But until now, this only made sense if you ran a foundation that was millions of dollars in size. So when you look at smaller pools of capital that's earmarked for charitable giving, many average donors, and especially younger donors, don't have a meaningful understanding of the expected social impact of their contribution. Their contributions are generous, but they're not strategic. And I think the next generation of givers actually wants to give in a more strategic way, but simply doesn't have the tools to do so. And this is a shame because in aggregate, if these pools of capital were focused thoughtfully, they'd have the potential to magnify the impact of some really high-quality community building organizations. So what's stopping the next generation of donors from giving in a more strategic way? Well, frankly, capital allocation is complicated. What does it mean to be strategic about giving? How do we know if our dollars are achieving all they can, or if we're earning a satisfactory social return on our investment? How do we know if we're making the right decisions? Well, we're not going to be able to distill social impact down to the precision of finite figures in the same way that we can measure the performance of financial investments. Measuring social impact is incredibly complex. Many not-for-profits goals are long-term, far-reaching, and multidimensional. How do you measure the social impact of something as nuanced as self-confidence? How do you measure belonging or leadership skills? And yet, these social attributes are essential elements of building a great city and of our democracy. So while we can't measure performance with exact numbers, with rigorous research, we can identify higher and lower impact organizations, and we can strategically allocate funding to high social impact projects. We can put money behind ideas and people that are vital to our neighborhoods and vital to the issues we care about. Through research, we can activate potential. So I guess that was a long way of saying that this is why I've gotten involved with the Toronto Foundation. This year, the Toronto Foundation has established a project called Vision 2020 to inspire and facilitate strategic charitable decision-making for the next generation. The concept is simple. A next-generation philanthropist, such as myself, sets up a mini foundation with $10,000. Individually, this pool of capital is relatively small, but the Toronto Foundation is enrolling a cohort of 50 of these next-gen philanthropists. So in aggregate, the block is significant. With the research and expertise of the Toronto Foundation to support them, these 50 next-gen philanthropists learn about issues facing Toronto and about not-for-profit solutions that could be funded in order to address them. Then, the group decides together which high-impact ideas and people to put their energy and their money behind. After 3 years of learning together, these next-gen mini-foundations break away from each other to stand on their own, and each funder has their own foundation for life. This leaves 50 new foundations with training in philanthropic research, evaluation, and strategy. 50 new foundations that connect philanthropy to community needs and opportunities. Vision 2020 provides the structure, the tools, and the research for young people with smaller foundations to give as thoughtfully as those with much larger amounts of capital. It allows them to focus on building a better city and not just giving to charity when solicited. The Toronto Foundation's approach facilitates a process that puts energy and funding behind high-impact organizations. This process funds organizations that are run by capable, honest management who are able to compound the value of the limited resources available to them and magnify the impact of charitable funding over time. So why is this important? Because our city actually needs smart philanthropy and next-gen engagement in order to excel. If you look around Toronto, many organizations in arts, culture, health, and education exist because of the deep generosity of Toronto's great civic philanthropists. In fact, we wouldn't be here in Koerner Hall, we wouldn't be in this room, and we wouldn't be at a Walrus talk if it weren't for their commitment to building a better city. And some of them are here today, so to them, thank you. Thank you for building this city. Looking to the next generation, we have a responsibility to exert ourselves to give in the same measure that we've received. To achieve this, it's up to us to do our research, to allocate our philanthropic dollars strategically in order to build a more resilient city where we can all live up to our full potential. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Luca Anderson. I believe that we all have the potential to create social impact. And tonight, I'm going to give you the secret recipe to help unlock that potential. It's my tried, tested, and true recipe, and it's as simple as avocado on toast. It's called Faff and Beff. This acronym, hang in with me here. This acronym will help you remember the ingredients. So maybe you can repeat it with me. Faff and Beff. Faff and Beff, great. Excellent. Great job. So I've been working on perfecting this recipe for quite some time. It all began 15 years ago when my life changed in a split second, and I was all of a sudden introduced to a world that's really not well suited for someone that uses a wheelchair. I became increasingly frustrated encountering barriers that were preventing me from accessing spaces. I was also noticing that many other groups of people shared my frustration: parents pushing strollers, delivery people, and the elderly. frustration. Is there something in your life that frustrates you on a continuous basis? Chances are that you aren't alone. Now, instead of expending that valuable time and that energy choosing to kick and scream about an issue, we can harness that fire and use it for beneficial purposes. We can redirect that energy and steer it right into the pot. F for frustration. That is the first ingredient to social impact. I wanted people to start thinking about this huge issue, and I wanted people to start thinking about great ideas that could help solve some of the big problems that really affect all of us. I wanted store owners to realize the value of having a storefront that everyone could access. And I wanted to draw our attention to our human right to equal access. What's your platform and what's your broadcast channel? How are you going to get your message out there in order to develop that critical mass of support? I'm talking about awareness raising. That's the second ingredient. When we first approached business owners about their interest in getting a ramp, we were offering the ramps for a fee to cover our costs. But even at $50, most people weren't interested. Some business owners actually said that they don't need a ramp because they don't have any customers that use wheelchairs. So we had to figure out a different approach. We pulled together some volunteers and we got some building materials together, and we went back with an offer for a free ramp, and bingo, completely different response. Most of us really want to contribute to helping make this world an even better place. And by being involved in something that's socially impactful, that helps us do that. By being of service, and typically, we are being of service, and typically this doesn't come with a price tag. So offering something of value for free is the third ingredient. Social impact soup is really thick, and consequently it takes many hands to help stir the pot. From building a community of supporters on social media to engaging groups of inspired volunteers to help achieve your mission, having many hands on deck is key. Many hands, that's your M. Speaking of stirring the pot, social impact won't happen without disrupting the status quo. From Henry Ford's assembly line, disrupting the automotive industry, to Uber's ride-sharing technology and disruption of the taxi industry, not to mention those brightly painted ramps in front of more than 1,000 businesses in over 50 communities across the country. Yeah. In over 50 communities across the country, disrupting building codes and bylaws and our own understanding of accessibility. Stand behind your message. Be prepared to shake things up and be disruptive. What are the facts around the issue? What are the metrics? What are other people's stories about the issue? What's your story? What is the content that will go through your awareness-raising channels and on your platform? Without education, there is no increase in awareness. Education leads to social impact. E is for education, a crucial ingredient. Thank you, Ramp Ranger Blue. Setting a lighter tone has proven to be instrumental in building a supportive network and helping shift perspectives. Raising awareness is tough. It's also tough to see through this mask. It's exhausting work. So choosing to take it on with a fun tone is really, really important. So important that it's become one of our core values. Ramp Man embodies this core value. And whenever he's making social impact soup, he goes really heavy on the fun. So Faf and Beth. So here's what I ask of you. After these talks in the reception outside, hold on a second, introduce yourself to someone and tell them something that you find to be a frustration in your life. Have some fun opening up a conversation about how each of you might raise awareness about that issue. Well, I extend an open invitation to everyone here tonight to mix up their own bowl of social impact soup. Together, we can collectively raise our spoons and work in harmony to help make our communities even better places. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mccurdy. I'm here today to share with you my personal experience and leave you with the idea that the world we choose has to reflect the action we take. I'm here to plant the seed in your heart and mind, the seed of hope. In order for that seed to grow, we must use our voice. In 2011, the war started in Syria. We all watched the news coverage from our comfortable TV room. We saw thousands of people fleeing their home. Some of those people, they were my own family. They fled to Turkey. I tried to help them. I sent them money. For a few years, hearing their struggle. But I could not understand how difficult it was until I went to visit them in 2014. And what I saw and experienced is not what we all watch in the news. It was worse than I could ever imagine. I saw so many people, family, in the street without home to go to. Children were starving, begging for a piece of bread. Most of those children, they were working instead of going to school. My family, they were lucky. They have a place to live, but they slept in the cement floor because I paid their rent. I know I have to do something to help my own family. One day, I took my niece and nephew by hand and we start walking by the neighborhood. I do not speak their language, but I pointed to the children. And I told them they are Syrian refugees and they needed your help. Door after door was slammed shut in my face. And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, begging for help. 24 hours later, a truck showed up, full of furniture, blanket, toys, clothes. Even though the neighbor did not understand me, but they heard me. It was my last day to return back here to Canada, and I did not get to see all my family. My sister-in-law and my two nephews, they were stuck in a closed border trying to enter Turkey after they flee Kobani when ISIS invaded. They were 12 hours away from where I was. I did not get to see them, but I did not know I would never see them again. After that visit, I come home and I decided to bring my family here to Canada as a refugee. I tried every day for a few months, but my voice was not heard. Our border was closed. Our system was set up to fail. I have to tell my family that I cannot bring you to Canada unless something will change. Give me some time. But the time has run out. Desperate for their own family, my brother and his wife, like thousands of people were doing it, decided to trust the smuggler and take a risk to cross the Mediterranean. They thought they will go somewhere with mean freedom, safety, and hope. In September the 2nd, in 2015, I heard the tragic news that my sister-in-law, Rihane, and my two nephews, Ghalib and Alan Kurdi, have drowned. I will never forget the moment I find out about their death. I remember I fall to the floor and I scream as loud as I could. I want the world to hear me. The image of my nephew, Alan Kurdi, the boy on the beach, was all over the media across the world. And that same day, my brother, who cried to me and told me, the picture of my son is the wake-up call to the world. It's the message from God to tell us enough suffering. Sadly, our tragedy is just one of many. At that time, I had two choices: stay home and continue to cry and feel there is nothing I could do or say can it change anything. And I thought, who am I? I was nobody. Or step out and add my voice. Out of my pain, the strength was given to my heart. And I decided to speak up on behalf of all those suffering people who does not have a voice. And most importantly, for my nephew, the boy on the beach, whose voice will never be heard. And I said, if I couldn't save my own family, let's save the others. I spoke to media globally. I went to Europe to tell the world leaders about the inhumanity was happening, that my people are innocent victims. They flee by force, not by choice. Open your heart, open your border, and end the war. Finally, my voice was heard. It took a tragedy for my voice to be heard. It took one picture, the picture of the boy on the beach, to move us, to be human. The suffering my brother and I have seen the last 2 years at the refugee camp is unacceptable. Every refugee I talked to, they told me, the world is talking about us, but no one talked to us. Today, people all over the world are still suffering, but the beauty of it, it's all up to us to end it. We need to join our voice together and stand up from our silence and tell the world leader, enough is enough, and force them to act, not just talk, urgently. Find a peaceful solution to stop the crisis and war that caused innocent people to become a refugee in the first place. It's time for an action, not for a blame. That is what the real social impact is. It's the only way we can have a stronger voice and put a human life before money and politics, we can bring the world to peace and love again. For me, I still use my voice to bring awareness and justice to our people. We opened the Mccurdy Foundation to help innocent children affected by war and to keep my nephew's image alive as a permanent reminder so we do not forget and we do not go silent. I hope I have planted the seed in your heart and ask you to stand up and add your voice to mine and be counted. I have a mission ahead of me. Will you join me? Thank you.
Thank you, Tima. Tima, the aunt of the boy on the beach, I know she won't tell you this, but I will tell you that she still has 2 sisters she's trying to bring to Canada with their families, and maybe we could help you do that. I would like to thank all of our talkers. Please join me in when I do them all together. Brent Hawkes, Heather Johnston, Marina Glogovic, Siri Agrel, Roz McLean, Luca Anderson, and Tima Mccurdy. Thank you to Mark Beckles, Valerie Chort, Cameron Miller, Navi Brar, Joanne Durham, and everyone at RBC for your ongoing support. Thank you to our national partners, Inspire, Shaw, Shirk, and AMIA Aeroplan. As I mentioned, this is the 87th Walrus Talks. That means there are now almost 700 7-minute talkers. Videos at thewalrus.ca that you can watch whenever and wherever you want, or on our YouTube channel called Walrus Television. There's actually, as you heard from some of our talkers tonight, there's never been a more important time for independent fact-based journalism, the kind that you expect from the Walrus, and never has producing it been so challenging. Yes, the media industry is beyond disrupted. Numerous publications in Canada have radically diminished their offerings. It's hard not to be alarmed by what this means for the quality of our information. The Walrus, purveyors of truth, we are determined to take up the slack and are increasing our efforts to produce the best journalism in Canada. We are an audience-supported organization. A third of our organization, our operations, are funded by donors. And it might surprise you to learn how expensive journalism is. Some of our major investigative pieces can cost between $20,000 and $30,000 a piece. As Brent Hawkes said, with funding, great things can happen. And as Siri said, and if Siri says it, it must be true, we need to do this work. It's important work. It's what readers and people deserve and want. So we're thriving because of you, and we want to try a little game with you. Whip out that phone, hold it up. Come on, get out your phone. Everybody, turn it on. Show me the screen. This is what we used to do at April wine concerts with our lighters. You know, hold up that screen. Tonight is a wonderful time to fall in love. Remember that? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little exercise in social impact. Open your email. In the to field, write donate at thewalrus.ca. Come on, you can do it. It's going to come straight to here. Donate at thewalrus.ca. That address leads straight to this iPad. Now, when you put in your amount, be very careful with the punctuation and the zeros, okay, because I'm going to believe you. So if you want to give us $50, make sure it's not $50,000, although if you want to give us $50,000, that too is fine. Put in any amount between $10 and $1 million, $10 and $1 million, because guess what? We have an anonymous donor tonight. Every dollar that you email to this iPad in the next 3 minutes will be doubled. So $100 becomes $200 instantly. It's magic. And just to give you some idea of your immediate social impact, with $5,000, we pay a writer for a big feature. For $500, we can pay for one of the daily articles at thewalrus.ca. It is the power of stories, the primacy of narrative. Thank you, Siri. And remember, every single one is doubled. We do not want to leave, as Roz said, any potential unrealized. You are all here. This is how the next generation of people is going to give. Now, I'm not sure what's happening here. Maybe there's so much happening that it can't all come at once. Is that what's happening? Is everyone hit send? Yes? You've all hit send. Okay. Oh, they are starting. They are starting to come here. You are all fantastic. Thank you for knowing that journalism matters. While we're finishing with you guys, please, audience, keep sending. I'm going to set our speakers free so we can meet them at the reception. Speakers, thank you. We will see you in a couple of minutes. Grab a drink. RBC, we're setting you free too. So the post-talks reception is about to happen. You can meet the Walrus team. If you have just sent your pledge to thewalrus.ca, please go to the donor table at the reception and get your Walrus sticker and your button and your presents and your love. There will be a ton of love. And you can meet the Walrus team, David Leonard and everybody else. Sign up for the Walrus newsletter. And our pals at Adventure Canada are out there. This doesn't cost you anything. You can go visit the Adventure Canada trip and enter your name to win a trip circumnavigating Newfoundland on the Walrus expedition. That will be really cool. At the reception, there is food, there is drink, and if you are there, there will also be good conversation. Please remember, you are the Walrus. Thank you for coming. Safe home. Good night.